bought my mom a new house, but she secretly invited to live with her my stepdad and his daughters who bullied me as a child. I love them and I want them here. So I called the cops and I'm Tasha. And back then I lived with my parents in a cozy 2-story house. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was home. Mom and dad seemed happy enough, at least to my kid eyes. The divorce came as a surprise, even though it was peaceful. No screaming, no fighting over furniture, nothing like what my friend Jenny went through when her parents split up. Dad just moved out one day, taking his tools and clothes with him. He hugged me tight and said, "I'll always be here for you, princess." Mom handled it well at first. When Dad's alimony checks came in, she'd roll her eyes and mutter under her breath about how it wasn't enough, but that was about it. I spent weekends with Dad at his small apartment above the auto repair shop he was trying to get off the ground. The place always smelled like motor oil and coffee, but I loved it. Then, about a year after the divorce, Mom met Richard. He had 2 daughters, Sarah and Emma, both a couple years younger than me. When Mom told me about their engagement, her eyes lit up like Christmas lights. "Just think about it, honey," she gushed, holding my hands in hers. "You'll have sisters. We'll be a proper family again. Richard is such a wonderful man, and his girls are so sweet. You'll love having siblings." I remember nodding eagerly, caught up in her excitement. I'd always wanted sisters, and the way Mom described them made it sound like a fairy tale coming true. She spent hours talking about our future life together, painting pictures of family game nights and sister bonding sessions. The wedding was small but nice. I wore a pale blue dress and carried a basket of flowers. Sarah and Emma wore matching pink dresses and kept whispering and giggling together during the ceremony. I tried to catch their eyes, hoping they'd include me in their secret jokes, but they just turned away. When they moved in, I was so excited I could barely sleep the night before. I'd cleaned my room, made space in the bathroom cabinet for their things, and even put together welcome cards for each of them. Mom helped me arrange flowers in their rooms. "See, you're already being such a good sister," she said, kissing my forehead. If only I'd known then what was coming. Maybe I would have fought harder to keep things the way they were. Maybe I would have told Dad how I really felt about Mom remarrying. But I was 11 and I believed in fairy tales about happy blended families. It took exactly 3 days for my fairy tale to turn into a nightmare. On the 4th morning after they moved in, I woke up early as usual to get ready for school. But when I tried to go into the bathroom, the door was locked. "Just a minute," Sarah called out in a sing-song voice. That minute turned into 45. I kept knocking, telling them I needed to get ready for school, but all I heard was giggling and the hairdryer running. When they finally came out, both Sarah and Emma were perfectly groomed, wearing matching outfits. "Beauty takes time," Emma smirked as they passed me. "You should know that." "Oh wait, maybe you don't." I barely had time to brush my teeth before the school bus came. That became our new morning routine, them hogging the bathroom while I waited, usually ending up being late or rushing, but the bathroom was just the beginning. At dinner that night, I went to sit in my usual spot next to Mom, but Sarah had already taken it. When I opened my mouth to protest, Mom cut me off. "Tasha, honey, why don't you sit over there?" She pointed to the chair furthest from her, next to the edge of the table. "It's just a chair, don't make a fuss." I watched as Mom served Sarah and Emma first, cutting their meat into perfect pieces, asking if they wanted more juice, fussing over them like she used to fuss over me. Richard beamed at the scene while I picked up my food in silence. Things got worse when Sarah spotted my collection of hair accessories, the ones Mom and I had bought together during our weekly shopping trips. "Oh my God, Emma, look at these," Sarah exclaimed, pulling out my favorite butterfly clips. "They'd look so much better on us." "Those are mine," I said, trying to take them back. "Girls should share," Mom said firmly. "Tasha, don't be greedy. Sarah and Emma are your sisters now." After that, Sarah and Emma started calling me Greedy Tasha whenever adults weren't listening. But that wasn't enough for them. My textbooks would mysteriously end up with torn pages. My clothes would get accidentally stained with nail polish. My homework would vanish, only to reappear crumpled in the trash. Every time I tried to tell Mom, she'd shake her head disapprovingly. "Tasha, stop trying to get attention. I know this adjustment is hard, but making up stories about your sisters isn't the way to handle it. They're not my sisters." I finally snapped one day after finding my favorite sweater with a huge hole in it. That earned me a lecture from both Mom and Richard about family and gratitude. But the final blow came a week later, when Mom announced she was reorganizing the bedrooms. "Sarah and Emma need more space for their things," she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your room has better closets, so they'll take that one. We've already moved your stuff to the small room next to the laundry." The small room was basically a glorified closet with a window. It barely fit my bed and dresser. When I saw all my things crammed into that tiny space, something inside me broke a little. This wasn't just about a room, it was about my place in this family. Or, rather, my lack of one. Richard wasn't content just letting his daughters torment me, he had to join in too. Any little thing I did wrong became proof that I was a difficult child. If I was quiet, I was sulking. If I spoke up, I was being disruptive. I couldn't win. Just like your father, he'd say, shaking his head whenever I didn't meet his impossible standards. Always causing problems. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? The funny thing was, Dad was actually doing pretty well with his auto repair business. He specialized in luxury cars, and while it was tough at first, he was slowly building a solid reputation. I never told Richard this though. Let him think what he wanted. My weekends with Dad became my lifeline. We'd order pizza, watch old movies, and he'd tell me stories about the fancy cars he was working on. Sometimes I'd sit in his office while he did paperwork, just enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. "How are things at home, Princess?" he'd ask occasionally, and I'd always say fine. He had enough on his plate, working long hours to get his business off the ground. The last thing he needed was to worry about me too. The years crawled by. I threw myself into my studies, spending as much time as possible at the library or with friends. Anything to avoid being home. Before I knew it, high school graduation was approaching. I'd applied to several colleges. I got acceptance letters from most of them. I was over the moon. Finally, a chance to get away, to start fresh. The day after graduation, I couldn't contain my excitement anymore. We were all sitting at dinner and I decided to share my news. I got accepted to several colleges. I announced, pulling out the acceptance letters. Even got offered some partial scholarships. I really liked the business program at. Richard's laugh cut through my words like a knife. Not a genuine laugh, one of those mocking ones that makes your stomach sink. "College?" he smeared. "And who exactly is going to pay for that? Your loser father? The guy who can barely keep his little garage afloat?" I stared at him, the letter suddenly feeling heavy in my hands. "I have scholarships and I can get loans." "Don't be ridiculous," he interrupted. "We're not co-signing any loans for you. We're saving our money for Sarah and Emma's education." I turned to Mom, desperately hoping she'd stand up for me. Defend me. Be my mother for once. She just looked down at her plate. "Richard's right, honey," she said softly. "We need to think about the girl's future." Something inside me snapped. All the hurt, all the rejection, all the years of being pushed aside, it all came pouring out at once. "You haven't paid any attention to me in years," I shouted, pushing back from the table. "All you care about is pleasing your precious husband and his perfect daughters. When's the last time you even asked how I was doing? When's the last time you acted like my mother instead of their stepmother?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the sharp crack of skin against skin. It took me a moment to realize what had happened, that my mother, my own mother, had slapped me across the face. My cheek stung, but what hurt more was seeing Sarah and Emma's expressions. They were actually smiling, clearly enjoying the show. Richard sat there with a satisfied smirk, like he'd been waiting for this moment. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat radiating from where her hand had struck. Mom just stood there, her hand still raised, her face a mixture of anger and something else. Shock? I didn't stick around to find out. I ran to my tiny room and started throwing things into my suitcase. Clothes, photos, my few remaining precious possessions that Sarah and Emma hadn't ruined. I could hear movement in the house, but no one came to check on me. No one tried to stop me. No one said they were sorry. I made it about a block before the adrenaline wore off and reality hit me. I was 18 with no money, no plan, and nowhere to go. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called Dad. "Hey Princess, what's up?" His cheerful voice almost made me break down right there. "Ken, can you come get me?" I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course. Where are you?" 15 minutes later, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up beside me. For a moment, I thought I'd given him the wrong street. There was no way this was my dad's car. But there he was, grinning through the open window. "Like my new ride?" he asked as he got out to help me with my suitcase. "This is yours?" I stared at him in disbelief. I thought it was a customer's car. He laughed, that warm, familiar laugh I'd grown up with. "Nope, all mine. Bought it last week. Business has been good." Then he noticed my suitcase, and his expression changed. "Tasha, what's going on? Why are you out here with a suitcase?" The whole story came pouring out. The college acceptances, Richard's mockery, Mom's betrayal, the slap. Dad's face grew darker with each word. By the end, he was gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. "I'm going over there right now," he growled, starting to turn the car around. "No, Dad. Please don't." I grabbed his arm. "It's not worth it. I just want to leave." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right, let's go home." Over lunch at his place, he'd learned to cook pretty decent pasta over the years. Dad dropped another bombshell. "Remember that fleet contract I was bidding on with the luxury car rental company?" He was trying to act casual, but I could see him practically bouncing with excitement. Well, I got it. Exclusive maintenance contract for their entire fleet. The business is really taking off. I was genuinely happy for him, but I must have looked a bit dejected thinking about my own situation, because he quickly added, "And you know what else? I've been saving money for years, putting aside whatever I could for your college fund. It's not enough for an Ivy League school, but combined with your scholarships." I nearly choked on my pasta. You've been saving for my college?" He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Of course, I have, princess. Did you really think I'd let Richard be right about me?" For the first time that day, I started crying, but these were happy tears. All those years I'd spent protecting Dad from my problems, and here he'd been quietly planning for my future the whole time. I decided to keep my college plans secret from Mom and her perfect family. Let them think they'd won. I spent that summer living with Dad and working at the Sweet Bean Cafe downtown, to save up some extra money. Then one afternoon, the bell above the door chimed, and in walked Sarah and Emma, dressed like they were heading to a fashion show instead of a coffee shop. They settled into a booth in my section. Of course they did, and smirked as I approached with my notepad. Well, Sarah drawled loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "Looks like someone found their true calling." Emma snickered. "Yeah. We just wanted to see how the other half lives before we head off to college in the fall. Dad's already picked out the perfect schools for us." "Can I take your order?" I kept my voice professional, fighting back a smile. "If they only knew." "Oh, you'll probably still be taking orders when we graduate," Sarah continued, examining her manicured nails. "But don't worry, maybe we'll leave you nice tips when we visit home from college." I just smiled and wrote down their complicated, half CAF, extra hot drink orders. Let them have their moment. I knew where I was headed. That fall, I started college in the neighboring state. I threw myself into my business classes, made new friends, and started building a life that had nothing to do with my past. Mom never called to apologize for the slap or for anything else. I didn't call her either. Dad visited whenever he could and we talked almost every day. 4 years flew by. I graduated with honors and landed a job at a marketing firm in the same city as my college. Starting salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to rent a small apartment and live comfortably. I worked hard, stayed late, took on extra projects. My bosses noticed. The promotions started coming. First junior manager, then senior manager, then team leader. Each one came with a nice bump in pay. I was able to start saving serious money for the first time in my life. Then one day, Dad showed up at my apartment with a massive grin on his face. His business had expanded to 3 locations, and he just signed contracts with 2 more luxury car rental companies. "I want you to have this," he said, pulling out a cashier's check. The amount made me dizzy. "It's for a down payment on your own place. You've worked so hard, princess. You deserve this." 2 months later, I was moving into my own apartment, not rented, owned. More raises came. More promotions. I started thinking about buying a house, something with a garden maybe, in one of those quiet neighborhoods outside the city. Then one evening my phone rang. Unknown number. "Tasha?" The voice was hesitant, familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. It's Mom. "I think it's time we talked. I want to try to fix things between us." "Okay." I heard myself say. "Let's talk." We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, neutral territory. When Mom walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, tired, nothing like the competent woman who had chosen her new family over me years ago. "You look wonderful," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Her hands were shaking slightly as she arranged her napkin. We made awkward small talk about the weather and my job until the waitress brought our coffee. Then Mom took a deep breath and the real story came out. "I left Richard," she said, staring into her cup. "Or rather, he left me. After we mortgaged the house to pay for the girls' college." I waited, letting her continue at her own pace. "They promised they'd help with the payments once they graduated." She laughed bitterly. "But when the time came, they had excuses. Always excuses. The job market was tough. They needed to focus on their careers. They had their own expenses." She wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. "We lost the house. All those years of payments, gone. And Richard, he just packed up and moved in with Sarah, said he couldn't handle the financial stress anymore." "Mom," I started, but she held up her hand. "Please, let me finish. I was wrong, Tasha. I chose them over you. I let them hurt you. I hurt you. And I am so sorry." The tears in her eyes were real. The tremor in her voice was real. And, despite everything, despite all the years of pain and rejection, I found myself reaching across the table to take her hand. "I forgive you," I said softly, surprising myself with how much I meant it. The next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. About Mom, alone and homeless after giving everything to people who had given nothing back. It felt like karma, in a way, but it didn't make me happy. Instead, I felt a strange mix of sadness and opportunity. A chance to be the bigger person. I called her on a Wednesday evening. "I've been thinking about buying a house," I said after we exchanged hellos. "Something in the old neighborhood with a garden maybe. It would be too big for just me. But, maybe you'd like to live there?" I took a week off work and flew home to house hunt. Found a beautiful place just outside town. Nothing fancy, but solid and welcoming with a wraparound porch and mature trees in the yard. Mom cried when she saw it. When Dad heard about my decision, I expected him to be upset. Instead, he surprised me. "You've got a bigger heart than most, princess," he said, hugging me tight. "I'm proud of you." The next few months fell into a pleasant routine. I'd fly in for weekend visits, spend time with Dad first, then head over to the new house to see Mom. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly but surely. She seemed happier, more like the mom I remembered from childhood. During one visit, I noticed some unfamiliar things in the house: men's boots by the door, a jacket I didn't recognize hanging in the hallway. "Oh, just a friend visiting," Mom said quickly when I asked. "You know how it is." I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe I should have. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was just settling into work when my phone lit up with Aunt Carol's number. "Tasha, honey," she said, her voice hesitant. "There's something you need to know. It's about your mother. Well, Richard's living in the house. Him and his daughters. They moved in months ago." "That's impossible," I said. "I was just there 2 weeks ago." "It was just Mom. Because she makes them leave before you visit," Aunt Carol said gently. "They clear out every time you're scheduled to come. I found out from Marie next door. She's been watching them come and go for months now." Suddenly, those friends' belongings I'd seen made terrible sense. The boots, the jacket, the way Mom had brushed off my questions. I thanked her, hung up, and booked the first flight home. No warning, no calls to Mom. Just grabbed my laptop, I could work remotely, and headed to the airport. It was Wednesday afternoon when I pulled up to the house in my rental car. Richard's old pickup was in the driveway, the same one he'd had all those years ago. My key turned smoothly in the lock. The scene in the kitchen could have been pulled straight from my teenage years. Mom at the stove, wearing her favorite apron, fussing over a pot of something that smelled like Richard's favorite beef stew. Sarah and Emma at the kitchen table, looking exactly like their old entitled selves, just older. Richard in his usual chair, reading the newspaper. Mom saw me first. The wooden spoon she was holding clattered to the floor. "Tasha." Her face went white. "I wasn't expecting you until Saturday." "Clearly," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "What are they doing here?" "We live here now," Sarah announced with a smirk. "Mom invited us. She realized family should stick together." "Family?" I turned to Mom, who was nervously wiping her hands on her apron. "After everything they did to you? After they cost you your house?" "They apologized," Mom said weakly. "They're trying to make things right. Richard's changed. The girls have changed. Get them out." I cut her off. "Now, this is my house, and I want them gone." "No." Mom straightened up, and I saw that familiar stubborn look cross her face. "I love them and I want them here." "Love them?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "They drove you into debt. They cost you your house. Have you forgotten how they treated me? How they bullied me every single day? How they destroyed my things, stole my room, made my life hell? That was years ago." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "They were just children then. And what about now?" I demanded. "They used you for college money and abandoned you. Richard left you when things got tough. How can you just forgive that?" "Because they're family," Mom insisted, her chin lifting stubbornly. "They made mistakes, but they're sorry now." Sarah and Emma exchanged smug looks. Richard just sat there with that same self-satisfied smile I remembered from my childhood. "Fine," I said, my voice ice cold. "Then I'm giving you a choice, Mom. Right now. Them or me." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. I watched Mom's face searching for any sign of the mother I used to know. The one who used to braid my hair and kiss my scraped knees and tell me I could be anything I wanted to be. "I choose them," she said finally. "We're happy together, Tasha. Why can't you just accept that?" Something inside me hardened permanently. "You have 2 days to get out of my house. All of you. You can't do this." Mom's voice rose to a shriek. "I'm your mother. You can't throw me out. Watch me." I turned and walked out, their voices following me down the driveway. 2 days later, I returned. Nothing had changed. Their cars were still in the driveway, and when I walked in, they were all sitting in the living room like they owned the place. "I told you to leave," I said. Mom actually laughed. "And I told you, you can't throw me out. I'm your mother." "Fine." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Then I'll let the police explain it to you." "You wouldn't dare." Richard started to rise from his chair. "Hello? Yes. I need assistance removing unauthorized occupants from my property." I stated my address clearly, maintaining eye contact with Mom the whole time. What followed was ugly. The police arrived within minutes. Mom screamed and cried as the officers explained that yes, I could evict them, and no, she had no legal right to stay. Richard turned purple with rage, calling me every name he could think of. Sarah and Emma joined in, their true colors showing through their designer clothes and fake smiles. "You ungrateful bitch," Mom shrieked as the police escorted them out. "After everything I've done for you,